Hi, my name is Christian Vasquez. I'm a doctoral candidate at the Steve Higgs School of Social Work. Um, and I got a grant from the NCAA. And this is a study that I was doing during my doctoral studies. And I brought along a colleague, and I'll let him introduce himself. But the title of this presentation is An Examination of Barriers Related to Recruiting Student Athletes from Low Socioeconomic Backgrounds and Insights from Division I Recruiters.
Thanks, Christian. My name is Dr. Jerry Reynolds II, and I'm an assistant professor of social work at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana. And I'm thankful that Christian extended the opportunity for me to contribute to this paper. And we're also thankful to the CSRI members in the board for the opportunity to present what arguably is an interdisciplinary approach because of, we're coming from social work and presenting on sport-based topics. So, and this is one of the big thrusts of this is for us was to look at not just the issues, but also to look at it from a traditional lens of social work, which is family systems theory. So take it away, Christian.
So research on diversity in college athletics, mostly focuses on racial ethnic diversity. And even though sometimes we think about socioeconomic diversity and racial ethnic diversity, they go hand in hand, they're not really the same. And so if you try to look for literature on socioeconomic diversity on the over 460,000 student athletes playing across 24 sports, there's no representative findings. And again, this is a qualitative study, so we're not saying this is representative of everybody, but it is some exploratory new information that we're able to provide on socioeconomic diversity and student athletes in college. And so, increasing the recruitment of student athletes with low SES is important because it offers another avenue for attending and paying for education for those who would not attend or be able to afford college otherwise. As someone who had a scholarship to play soccer in college, I know the impact that a scholarship can have on a family financially. And so the research questions that we use to guide this study were: what are current practices for recruiting? What are the barriers to recruiting student athletes from low socioeconomic backgrounds? And what could be done to improve the recruitment of student athletes from low socioeconomic backgrounds? And one unique thing about this study is that it compiles qualitative information from a diverse a sample of coaches from across the country, and we'll show the sample later on in the presentation.
All right, so the family systems theory approach was used in our analysis because one of the things that is central to this study is the family and the athlete experience, not just in the recruiting process, but as a college athlete and before they they go to college, is the family. And so the authors use the family systems perspective to guide the analysis. And also one of the things that we really zeroed in on within the family system uh, lens is to look at different areas of tension that families may experience during the recruiting process, and also ways for the recruiters to not only look at this from a family systems lens, but also for to help families facilitate those conversations, and also different ways of looking at it using that family systems perspective, because it's not just about the individual athlete, it's about their family system as a whole. Next slide. In addition to that, there's three main assumptions that drive the family systems approach. Is number one, that there is a codependency of members. Everybody is dependent upon one another. They are focused on functioning together and keeping keep the clock ticking, moving things in a circular manner, and keeping that family system going. One of the things that you also are looking for is that everyone in the family system is functioning optimally. So that way, you have what's called homeostasis. Everybody is moving together, everybody's in the same direction, unified. And also when something gets off track, they're able to reset and get back on track. And as exciting for a lot of young people as and families is the college athletic experience can be, it is important to remember that this can often disrupt family systems because ultimately what the athlete is about to experience and their family is also about to experience is a change to the family system when that athlete leaves to go from high school to college. And also, just thinking about the different areas of tension that a family will experience. Um, the the framework that we used really came from Barnhill in 1979, and it identified eight key areas of tension. There's a challenge of individuation versus enmeshment, mutuality versus isolation of members. Also, you have to think about rigidity and flexibility in the way that a family is functioning. Like, are they adaptable to change? Um, is there some things that are stable and driving the family, or is it just a disorganized system where everybody's kind of functioning in different directions? um, Also looking at the perceptions of members, what do they believe is true and what is not true? Are they clear things? Are they distorted? And also with that clear and distorted uh, perception, is there, what about the communication? Is the communication the family is has members have with one another and external uh, members, such as the recruiter, is it clear or is it distorted? Also, too, thinking about the role of the family members, you have to think about, is there the presence of reciprocity where a family member is reciprocating a role that's benefiting the individual, or is there conflict amongst the roles, like i.e. is the parent taking care, trying to do too much for the child and treating that child like the child athlete like a child rather than somebody who's transitioning to be an adult? And there's several examples that you'll see throughout this presentation. And also, another thing that you have to look at is sort of this distinction between clear and breached generational boundaries, which what that means is that sometimes there's that whole idea that the individual could be living through their parents, or the vice versa, the parents are living through the kids and vicariously through them, and that happens more and more in athletics, especially as the profile gets greater. So those are just some key areas that we looked at in terms of to see, was there the presence of this information and ways to look at it from a family systems perspective.
So this is the sample. And again, I'll let you take a look at that. And I just want to go back and touch on something related to the research question. So someone may look at those questions and say, well, there are some sports that are doing a good job of recruiting student athletes from low socioeconomic backgrounds. But this is definitely not the case across all sports. And, we're really trying to get away from, we've kind of heard, if you're good enough, they'll find you. Well, that may be the case if you're a flat out stud, but, what about these kids that are kind of in between, maybe even in between, they're not super low SES, kind of just above that threshold where they're just missing out on certain things. So we're really trying to get a broad range of low SES student athletes that are getting missed across all sports. So that leads me to the sample. We looked at men's and women's coaches across all sports. You can see at the very bottom, we covered soccer, golf, swim and dive, volleyball, tennis, basketball, track and field, softball, field hockey, baseball, and rowing. And sometimes we got both the men's and women's sport, or just one or the other. But you can see it's kind of representative of racial, ethnic disparities across coaching in general as well. But you can see we try to get a pretty good diversity of coaches in terms of experience, geographic region of the institution type. And so we think we covered a good range.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, obviously it was 20 coaches. They participated in a 45 to 90-minute interview. It was audio recorded. They consented to it. And then we transcribed the audio recordings, and the coaches were given a $20 gift card to Starbucks as an incentive. And so, as I mentioned, the interviews were audio recorded. We used thematic cluster analysis conducted in vivo. And those of you that may not be familiar with this process involved finding themes in each individual interview, then across all of the interviews to settle on themes that reach saturation kind of across the bigger picture. And we also use, in the final report, we use pseudonyms and for the institution and for the individual to protect their confidentiality. And the study was approved by UT IRB. And so we're presenting two main themes here. And the first is individual action. And so this is really focusing on the student athlete to take responsibility, take initiative of things that they can do to shed more light on themselves. And some of the sub themes were initiating contact. So we got some good advice from coaches about when they should reach out to coaches, what should be in the email or phone call when they talk to them. Finding, doing the research before reaching out to the coach so they know, what would it take to be at that institution. Again, that kind of falls into the second sub-theme, becoming knowledgeable. There's a lot of information that you can find online, and it's just taking the initiative to go find it. For example, one coach from track and field told us that they have a website where you can go to it and it'll basically tell you, this is how fast you need to run to get this type of scholarship at this type of institution. So that's just one example of that's something that student athlete can do on their own to kind of, make themselves more engaged in the process. And then being resourceful. For tons of coaches, these coaches are also, their parents. They've seen a lot of kids navigate this process in different ways. So they're saying, be willing to ask, a church member or a family friend or something to help you with the process, because almost always people are willing to help. But it's just if you're willing to ask, and if you don't ask, then you might never get the help. And so the second theme is focus on family support. As we're focusing on the family perspectives approach, we wanted to bring in what we heard from coaches about the family's involvement. And so the sub-themes focus on engagement with the recruitment process. So we heard often that one of the toughest things working with low socioeconomic families is that the parent involvement with the recruitment process was low. And so understanding, how much to be involved, this is something that Dr. Reynolds will talk about as well, is, knowing where you should stand as a parent, right? Because there's a lot going on, especially in this age where they're, kind of emerging into adulthood. And then resource support is same. If you can help the child in any way, whether that's financially with support to a local camp that's not that expensive, or supporting the child by taking them to a campus visit. If there's any way to support them, and this is where we know that it's not always possible for low SES families, but there are certainly some ways to support them, and just knowing what those ways are. And then utilizing networks. So this goes back to the same thing that we talked about with the student athlete. We've heard coaches talk about how families, kind of get into a bundle where, one parent will take a group of like 4 or 5 kids to a tournament. So that way families are kind of saving on resources there. But if you don't reach out and talk to these folks, then again, it's the same thing that we mentioned with the student athlete, you're kind of just missing out on opportunities that would be available for you for really nothing, but besides just reaching out.
Really going back to the themes of the family system, there's a lot of things that where we found there was really some pretty poignant examples in four different areas of the family systems theory approach in those areas of tension. Recruiters talked about sort of the process really has to be led by the individual student athlete. They should be the initiators. The parents should not be leading the process for them. But there was some recruiters who did say, well, the parents should kind of take the lead, but once they initiate the contact, maybe the individual athlete should take over and let the process guide them. Um, and in that case, when you're talking about individuation versus enmeshment, first of all, the recruiting process is starting earlier and earlier and earlier. And one of the things that it was ideally recommended to kind of start the hard look in the sophomore year of high school. So really, what that means is giving the individual athletes the space to initiate those emails, helping them communicate with the coaches. Also, it's about in the lines of communication, making sure that you are clear and what and succinct in asking, telling they gave guidance about what exactly they should be saying and not being more detailed than just some basics about what's their number, what school do they attend, etc. Maybe some stats, about their performance. Um, in terms of the mutuality versus isolation piece, one area that we did note in the study was that we don't want the athlete to feel isolated and kind of on the island, and also parents, we don't want them to feel alone as well, because there's going to be some different areas where a parent is able to be involved, and also when an athlete goes to college, they may not be able to be as involved. So you don't want the athlete to feel isolated. You want them to see what resources are out there within the university to connect them to the larger picture. And also keep in mind when an athlete is leaving, a lot of times they may go to an area where they are not able to, the family isn't able to come and visit them and to watch them play. So just keeping in mind that they could experience a sense of isolation just geographically from where they are. So it's about having that support around them and asking those types of questions about what does that support look like? What does the family role ultimately, what does that look like as well in the recruiting process? And not only just in the recruiting process, but after they are recruited and they enroll in college. As far as communication goes, the recruiters stress more so than not to be very clear in your communication. Have athletes send an email, and there's a whole larger piece about the digital divide. But when you send communication, get individuals involved to help you that athlete communicate. But ultimately, the athlete has to initiate that contact, and there are rules pertaining to how much they can communicate. But make sure that communication is very clear. And if you don't hear something, make sure that they follow up, and they use a consistent message across the process. And in terms of roles, they did mention, as I said, that the athlete is going to be central to this initiating and kind of following through. But the parents should really try to avoid sort of this creating a role conflict where, remember, that they are not the one being recruited. It is their athlete that is being recruited. And like I said, the parents should be able to support that individual through creating a role reciprocity mindset rather than a role conflict, mindset where there could be some challenges. So just ways to avoid that are to make very clear what the parent role should be in a process and what the athlete's role should be and what they can and can't do throughout the process. And this plays into the whole cultural piece too, about really taking into account how families culturally and ethnically, racially may function differently, and the recruiter should be aware that of these nuances so that they're able to appropriately engage the family as well. And one of the last conclusions that we're gonna, I'll just hit on this first one, is that they should balance the whole idea of the student athlete emerging into adulthood and having an appropriate level of involvement of the parents in the family system. That is the key finding of our study, is that recruiters should be aware of this perspective to sort of help counterbalance and be aware of these challenges so they can help best support the family in making not just the decision whether or not to go to a particular school, but to find the most appropriate school, whether it's close to home, whether it's far away, and also to think about the ways that the family can be engaged, not just in the recruiting process, before the recruiting process, during it, and after it. That's really the key. And also, Christian, I'll let you take away the last section.
And so, again, as I mentioned earlier, this project was funded by a grant through the NCAA. Any opinions, findings, conclusions are those of us, the authors, and do not necessarily reflect the views of the NCAA.
Yeah, and one last thing that I wanted to say, just just with us being social workers, both of us being social work trained, we are really looking at the centrality of the family to the athletic experience, and also we believe in some ways this provides support for uh, staff members or social workers within the department who really understand the family perspective to help engage, whether it's through the process of the transition, whether it's through the recruiting process, or after that athlete arrives on campus, to really provide those necessary supports, and not just to look at the individual as an athlete, but to look at the context of the whole family system. We believe that that's really important. And then I think this study reinforces a need for that going forward.
Yeah, and I'll add to that as well. And I think the themes, we really try to focus, as social workers, we want to, provide our clients with resources and help them be self-sufficient, right? We don't want to do it for them. So I think a lot of our themes and our sub-themes focused on, trying to help the family be self-sufficient in this process. And help them, not sit in silos, but as Dr. Reynolds was saying, as a family.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all very much for the opportunity, and we would welcome any feedback. You can reach us at our emails listed on this slide. Thank you very much, and take care.
Thank you.